Nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to this very special series of Te Ao Tapatahi, where we hear inspirational stories from our dames and knights who've made a huge impact on Te Ao Māori. Today we speak to our wahine crusaders, Dame Naida Glavish and Dame Iritana Tawhiwhirangi. Kia ora. It's a simple Māori greeting that got Dame Naida Glavish into trouble and nearly cost her job as a national tolls operator in 1984. But her defiance and her refusal to back down helped start the movement to normalise Te Reo Māori. Dame Naida Glavish has led a life of service. Her motivation to help her people was inspired by her nannies.
Raised on the shores of the Kaipara Harbour by two grandmothers. They lived across the road from each other and neither could speak English. I went home and I called in to see two nannies, and they were busy getting dressed and worrying about what to wear appropriate because they needed to go to Wellsford to the postmaster to sign some documents for them.
Dame Naida became a Justice of the Peace and started her journey into public service.
My two nani, they didn't know what to wear, to go and have documents signed by a stranger who was a Pākehā postmaster. And if I was a Justice of the Peace, I could save my old people that anxiety. That was the first title that I sought after so that I could be of service to my old people.
Becoming a dame is her latest and most prestigious title. It's recognising her work as a former teacher, a community advocate, and spending the last 31 years working in the public health sector.
I consider it a privilege to be of service, and so nothing's changed for me. I was raised by these grandmothers, and if I can say it in reo, then I'll translate it. Ina ki te koe te tahi mea he, hakatikangia. Ina kore, ka rite koe ki taua he. These grandmothers raised me with the saying that if you see something wrong in front of you, then you are duty bound to correct it. Because if you do not, then you will become like it. And that didn't make me very popular at all growing up, trying to correct what I saw was wrong in front of me with my cousins, with some of my aunties and uncles. And who do I think I am? A kid telling an auntie that what she was doing was actually wrong. And so I learnt the art of passing the message on to someone else who could raise it on my behalf and not be chastised for who do you think you are.
Kia ora.
Dame Naida hit international headlines in 1984. While working as a national tolls operator, she was punished by her bosses for greeting the customers on the phone with kia ora.
I find it very hard to understand why I should have to defend a salutation of this country to fellow New Zealanders.
I went to work in the post office believing that the greeting, kia ora, was a salutation to this country. It was, I am kia ora is me. I am reo Māori is me. And how could that be wrong? How could it be wrong?
Dame Naida was initially going to accept her punishment, but the words of her kuia instilled a fighting spirit.
On my way back to the work, going over the harbour bridge, I thought, well, I think I'll give my supervisor a break when I go back and I'll ease off kia ora, tolls here. As I thought that, I heard this voice in my ear. Nui ake tēnei take ia koe. This is far greater than just you. And I thought it was the wind coming in the window. And as I hit the top of the harbour bridge, arrived at the top of it, I wound the window up and it came back again. And I knew it was the voice of my grandmother. Nui ake tēnei take ia koe. This is far greater than just you.
Are you concerned that you might lose your job over this?
Well, I have stated to my superiors that it is an argument of principle on my part, and I hope I don't lose my job, but if I do, well, I'll still stand by my principles.
I said to him, as my supervisor, I will respect and accept what you have to do as a supervisor. The same as I will ask you to accept that I will do what I have to do as the mokopuna of my grandmother. And I got back on the boards, kia ora, tolls here. The following week, I had a meeting with Professor Ranginui Walker. And I said to Rangi, you know, Rangi, I'm being punished at work for saying kia ora, tolls here. Racist! Racist, he reckons. That's unacceptable. And I said, well, it's happening.
Dame Nader stuck to her principles and kept her job. The act of defiance helped normalise te reo Māori.
The supervisor took me off the toll boards and put me on a midnight to 6 shift because the toll rooms was jammed with people ringing in wanting to speak to the kia ora lady. The airlines, for instance, the pilots, they would start their flight off with kia ora, and schools were using kia ora. The University of Auckland changed the name of their paper, which was Crackham, for that week and called it kia ora. So kia ora went right throughout the country. So I can say that I fought the battle, but in actual fact, it was the country that won the war.
Coming up after the break.
It's not easy to have peace with a whakatauki, like if you see something wrong in front of you, you are duty bound to correct it.
Welcome back. Dame Nader Glavish is known as an auntie to many people, even to some of the world's most famous celebrities.
Need permission from you or anyone to lodge a rahui in our area.
Her will to fight injustices inspired Dame Nader's career in politics. She stood unsuccessfully for Parliament and was one of the founding members and former president of the Māori Party.
Politically, I've grown up all my life, in actual fact, not a freedom fighter like the real freedom fighters are, but I certainly cannot tolerate injustice. When I see injustice, I automatically would act on it.
Dame Nader was born with the Māori name Rangimarie. She says the name suits her.
It was a name that my grandmother explained to me. There is a belief, there is a knowledge and a knowing that Rangimarie actually means peace. It's not easy to have peace with a whakatauki, like if you see something wrong in front of you, you are duty bound to correct it. That doesn't create peace. In actual fact, you're often in turmoil. You have to walk around blind so that you don't see anything wrong in front of you if you want peace. So her explanation to me about peace was It was given to me because rangi is where all the storms are. In the rangi is the storms. And Māori is the calm on the earth. But in order to achieve calm, you've got to blow away the storms. That's that if you see something wrong in front of you, correct it. Otherwise, you're not going to achieve peace in any shape or form.
Throughout the years, Dame Nader has been an auntie to many people, even to the celebrities that visit Aotearoa.
I'm grateful for the phone call that I received. Oh, Whaia, we've got a manuhiri coming, and if you're not busy, can you come and arahi our manuhiri onto the marae? Oh, yeah, sure. So I went not really knowing the manuhiri was Oprah Winfrey.
We lose tradition and we lose ritual, we lose ourselves.
I was on the footpath when Oprah arrived. Anyway, and her car pulled up, and I walked up to Oprah and I went forehead, nostril. Went like that to her, and she stepped out, and forehead, nostril, hongi. And she was grateful to be invited to participate in that ancient ritual. And then we put the korowai on her, and she wanted to know if that was the same korowai Prince Charles had had on him. Well, however, no, it's not, but it's a korowai.
Dame Iritana Tāwhiwhirangi fought for the survival of te reo Māori when she became the mother of the Kohanga Reo movement. The pioneer was made a dame for her commitment to Māori education and says the honour is a tribute to hundreds of whānau around the motu. Without the hard work of Dame Iritana Tāwhiwhirangi and other leaders of the Kohanga Reo movement, te reo Māori wouldn't be where it is today.
Look where the language is. It's all over the place. Anything that wriggles is actually paying, is interested in the language. It's everywhere. I source it back to those mokopuna that sat at the feet of those expert linguistic elders. They were loved, they were safe, they were happy, they understood the culture, and they picked up the language. That generation now are the drivers of not just Maori language, not just the real, but Maori development, all phases of it.
In the late 70s, there was concern among Māori that te reo was becoming endangered. The Department of Māori Affairs introduced the philosophy of tū tangata to revitalise the reo and called on Dame Iritana for her help.
It was a direction given by the influential, renowned Maori leaders like Dame Te Ata, Sir John Bennett, Sir Graham Latimer, John Rangiho, a whole lot of key people who were the influential people in Maoridom. And it was they, and the kohanga know this, it was they that those elders out at Waifetu Marae, who when they were talking about policy for the department, the main policy came up as te reo, the language. And those old people said, we've got to stop expecting the government to realise the importance of the language. They mean well, but they don't know how. So we've got to do it ourselves. And one of the elders out there, I think it was Henare Tūwhāngai from the Kingitanga movement, he said, we've got to take back the responsibility and start when the babies are born. As soon as they're born, put them to the breast, and that's the beginning of sound that leads to language that is caught rather than taught. I was called in upstairs to actually take responsibility for what the old people said. And I thought, well, they've said it, but there's no template. And one of them in the room said, well, you could get early childhood regulations. Now, the reason I was called up there, not because I'm anything special, but rather because at the time I was the only trained teacher in the Department of Maori Affairs. I asked for time. I went home and it played on my mind. And then in the early hours of the morning, I suddenly remembered what those influential Māori leaders had said. And I thought, that's the answer. Go straight to the families. If we went back to them and restored faith in themselves, restored hope in them, gave them a purpose that was meaningful, and above all in my book, gave them back the responsibility. Because as long as someone else is responsible for you, you're actually you're losing faith in yourselves.
Dame Iritana was made a dame in 2009 for her services to Māori education. Initially, it was an honour she wanted to refuse.
In Māoridom, you let the people acknowledge you. Never talk about yourself. And so it's not a comfortable situation for me. At first, I refused it. But when I talked to my family, one of my daughters said that it's not so much a tribute to me as a tribute to the whānau who made this movement what it is. So that is actually the essence of how kohanga started in 1982. Hardly any language around, but those people brought their babies, and the parents came along that didn't know, sat in the kohanga and listened to the language.
Coming up after the break.
Well, I wasn't interested in being a nurse or a teacher. I certainly wasn't being interested in being told what to do. And so, because Dad was insisted that we be nurses, I took the other. I wasn't even interested in teaching, but I went there because my father was trying to get me to do what he wanted.
No mai hoki mai. Since 1982, Dame Iritana Tāwhiwhirangi has helped thousands of tamariki grow up surrounded by their mother tongue of te reo Māori through the Kohanga Reo movement. She expresses just as much aroha and passion towards her own tamariki. Dame Iritana Tāwhiwhirangi started her career as a teacher on the East Coast in 1948 before joining the Department of Māori Affairs, where she became the first Māori woman to be appointed as a district officer.
As you know, I'm nearly 100 years old. So back in the 1929-30s when I was born, and when I was at school, there were only two options for Maori girls. You were either a nurse or a teacher. My father had a niece who was a brilliant nurse. She was over in the Solomon Islands. He wanted my sister and me to be nurses. Well, I wasn't interested in being a nurse or a teacher. I certainly wasn't being interested in being told what to do. And so, because Dad was insisted that we be nurses, I took the other. I wasn't even interested in teaching, but I went there because my father was trying to get me to do what he wanted. As it happened, I fell on my feet because education became a real interest. I had a wonderful childhood because we had nothing. I grew up in the Depression. I never had a pair of shoes till I was 10. 18 of us lived in the one house because people talk about housing today. There was never a time in Māoridom where everybody owned their own home. So you had families living together. So my uncle and auntie, my father and me and my brother, there were 18 of us in this one house by the waterfall. But those were the Depression years. So we talk about poverty today. I find it, sad that there's never been more resource, never been more money, and never been more distress, because people have forgotten how to look after each other. We had no money in Hicks Bay. We had a cow, we had a draft horse, we had the waterfall, In the house we lived in, there was no running water, no bathroom, no electricity. But I didn't think it was fine. We had the sea, so we were never out of food. My grandfather grew vegetables, and we had the bush for wild pork. So food-wise, we were fine. Money-wise, well, as I say, I never had a pair of shoes till I was 10. And my knickers and my singlet was made out of flour bag. But as years went on, I found that education was actually tailored in a non-Māori system. Didn't realise it at the time, but as time went on, I listened to my old people and I heard the sadness in them that our culture was dying. That generation that were in Kohanga 40 years ago, they're probably in their 40s, mid-40s now. They're a force to be reckoned with.
E ngā ruranga o ngā iwi nau mai rarau.
Because they're very strong within themselves. They understand the world better, but the language is now embedded in this country. It's not about who's the most wonderful Maori speaker, that's fine, but it's also about those that are learning. Those are the step, and the next step.
As a mother of 2 sons and 4 daughters, Dame Eritana also wanted the best for her own tamariki.
Well, I've just let my children grow up and follow their interests. I've never ever said to my children, I want you to be this, or I want you to be that, or I want you to be something else. Because there are some parents who want their children to be like them, successful at this and successful at that. And while I think that's, of course we want our children to be successful, but I want them to be successful because of their interests, not because it's going to make me feel good about being their mother. I would just like young Māori or any young person, but young Māori, to pursue their world in their own cultural framework, but also to be able to also respect other cultural frameworks, whether it's Samoan or English or whatever. Because if you want to be respected and understood, then you've got to show the same respect and understanding of what another culture means to them. No other culture has the answer for me. And Māoridom hasn't got the answer for other cultures because you must value all of them. Having one culture as the umbrella for everybody is administratively expedient, but it is a wrong approach.
Co-founder of the Māori Party, Dame Tariana Tūria, is another wahine crusader who became a dame in 2015.
I think having 26 mokopuna and 28 great-grandchildren, definitely having a large whānau has been really wonderful. I think the person who played the greatest role in my life was my Auntie Wai that brought me up, because she taught me that kaupapa and tikanga were the most important things. It didn't matter what you did. When Dame Patsy Reddy offered for me to have it back here at home, I was really thrilled, because these are the people that have raised me.
I think the major thing that she achieved across a whole lot of areas was that she changed the narrative about how the rest of New Zealand view whānau and Māori.
Bringing it back home for Mum really was a way of, sort of receiving the honour on behalf of all of our people.
On the next show, we speak to former leaders of the New Zealand Women's Welfare League, Dame Aroha Rereti Crofts and Dame Areta Kōpū.
I was born with mana. It came from my tipuna. That same as you, same as every one of us. It matters not what nationality, we were born with mana. And that mana came from our tipuna. But for me, the dame is, I te ao Pākehā, is an acknowledgement of whatever I did over the years.
I find women today are very independent. I think women, I think the roles are shared far more than they were allowed to be. I mean, I think of my mother-in-law. She would have died if she'd seen my husband with a tea towel.